Well, hello and welcome back to the Lamppost Listener. My name is Daniel.
I'm Phil.
And this is a podcast where we journey chapter by chapter through C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. This is chapter 2 of The Horse and His Boy, A Wayside Adventure.
We're getting into the thick of it now.
The thick of it. There's no forest in here. I think they're on the side of them as they travel to the north. But
right.
This was a really fun chapter.
It was. It was fun to go back and piece by piece just pick apart what happened each moment, because there's a lot of stuff and it's not that long.
No, it was. I was thinking we've done a couple of these books at this point, and was thinking about other stuff that had happened in chapter 2. And as far as adventures go between all the books, it seems like we have gotten relatively far in this adventure, like physically and also just like emotionally in this journey so far. They've made their way. I mean, they're clear out of, I don't think we got the name of the village where Shasta was from. But I mean, they're definitely, that's far behind them. In fact, by the end of this chapter, it has been weeks and weeks since the, events of the at the very beginning of the book. So here we are 2 chapters into the book, and, a significant amount of time has taken place.
Right. It also ramps up at an interesting pace. We go a couple days, a couple more days, but that's all in a couple sentences, and then suddenly it's a few weeks later.
They're also in this chapter, we'll get to it obviously later on, there's a lot to unpack there. As a first-time reader of this text, there is a moment with Aslan, or what appears to be Aslan, that it was the first time I was reading, and there really was an unexpected appearance of Aslan. Every other book we read, I know when Aslan's going to show up. Yeah. And this was the first time it was just like this sense of relief of like, oh my goodness, this excitement. I was getting really, really excited when you see when the lion's roar came up and stuff. And so, that's what it's like to be able to encounter this for the first time with fresh eyes. And that made it really fun for me. It made me so glad that I haven't read this before, because I really do get to experience it for the first time.
Yeah. So just a reminder, Daniel is not going to read ahead, so he has to read one chapter at a time.
Have you read more than 30% since the last time we talked?
No.
Nice.
Yes.
And see, they don't know this, but it's been 4 years since we recorded the last podcast.
We're doing this really far in advance.
I don't think we've mentioned that, right? Yeah, we started recording in it was 2003, I think.
Yeah, 7.
2007.
Or
2007.
1. Yeah.
2007. That's right. So we started recording 2007, and I don't know if listeners, it's 2012 where we are.
You're doing some Avengers Endgame stuff right now.
I hated that they did that in the movie where they because now everything in the MCU is going to be weird timelines. I don't know. You're the one still watching Falcon and whatever the guy's name is, Silver Arm Man. But I'm acting like I don't know that Bucky Barnes' name is Winter Soldier. Mm-hmm. I haven't read him in comics and wasn't like first in line with my ticket at the movie theater to be like, that's Bucky Barnes from the comic books, guys. Right.
I'm so excited for when you inevitably do watch the show, because it's not going to be because I convinced you. It's going to be because you, for some reason, stumbled upon something online and then binge watched the whole thing.
I don't do the binge watch. You know that. I will watch it. So Anna and I have been watching Downton Abbey We've been watching Downton Abbey for over a year, and there's only 6 seasons with like 8 episodes each. And we started when COVID began. We started watching, and it is now, April, the end of April of 2021. So, 2012. My bad. So I mixed the 1 and the 2 up. That's
the entire point of that aside was to get Daniel to slip up and say the actual unit it is. Should we get to the chapter summary?
We should. We should get right into the chapter summary. It's an even chapter, which means you have prepared a statement for us. Would you like to read your statement?
I'm going to read my statement aloud. Shasta, very sore from riding all day, and Bree, very patient and a bit rude in his teaching.
I want to pause you for a second. I did look it up. It is pronounced Shasta.
It is Shasta?
It is Shasta.
Oh, man.
Yeah, you want to try
According to who?
I looked up a bunch of other podcasts I listened to. They all said Shasta. And I listened to lectures.
That's the authority.
I mean, not a single person said Shasta, so like you.
And we're a podcast. That's going to be so hard to get used to. Shasta, very sore from riding all day, and Bree, very patient and a bit rude in his teaching, journey along the coast, with the horse regaling the boy with tales of his many adventures as a fierce stallion in times of war. Several weeks of this go by, and traveling by moonlight one evening, they hear another horse traveling along at a similar pace. Several weeks of this go by, and traveling by moonlight one evening, they hear another horse trotting along at a similar pace. Suddenly, the sound of a lion sends them running. In their effort to stay away from the roars of the lion, they end up directly beside the new horse and its rider, both of whom demonstrate an ability to talk. This new reveal leads to both groups identifying a common goal of escaping to Narnia. When the mare and Erebus, the rider, agree to team up with Shasta and Bree, though the children are not nearly as thrilled as the horses.
Well done.
Thanks. How about that Hwen name?
Oh, man. We already have enough trouble.
We're going to need special mics if we have to say that name a lot.
Hwen.
Hwen.
It is an interesting name. I like this addition of these two characters, though. I mean, we only got like 2 pages of Erebus. I loved her spunkiness.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the kind of just... I actually really liked the way she kind of talked down to Shasta, and then how he kind of sulked for the whole...
Yeah.
It's
goes on a hunger strike, refuses to eat.
I don't know their exact ages yet, and I've been hesitant to look them up just because I don't want to get spoiled. But I have to imagine having, spent a lot of time with children. I think they're 12. I think they have to both be 12 because
That's my guess too.
This feels like 12-year-olds. I mean, and I was like this too. I'm not just ragging on, 12-year-olds, but I was like this as a boy too. If I got my feelings hurt, especially if it was by a young lady, it was like there was no worse injustice that could have been done upon me, and I would be so grumpy. And then it's that thing where you try to look cool and then you realize you don't look cool, so you feel worse about trying to look cool.
The downward spiral.
I've mentioned on the show before how uncool I was in middle school, that I went through the whole year of only wearing shorts, and then I decided, wow, that was really lame and a weird way to like find my identity, so I'll go in 7th grade and only wear long pants. So like I only wore shorts in 6th grade, only wore pants in 7th grade.
Luckily, our climate probably supported both.
I mean,
well.
it was never miserable. That's not true. I walked to school, I showed up at school,
I was driven. My mom took me.
No, but like.
But it wasn't the snow, and it was uphill.
Snow on the ground, and I have shorts on to prove how cool I am.
Yeah. I personally never struggled with that, so I'm just gonna.
You wear shorts all the time.
That's right.
You
it's
like
hot in here.
It hits 45 and feels like, all right, shorts weather.
That's true, because it's gonna warm up.
So okay, that's my initial impressions just were that I really loved the characters here. I loved the sense of adventure. What about you? How did you feel about this chapter emotionally?
So it sounds like you identified the lion roar as Aslan right away.
Disagree?
No. Did you identify it when you were first reading it?
Absolutely. I was like, This is definitely... I mean, how many lions are there in these books?
Well, there's one other lion from a similar time period, remember?
Yeah, but like, come on.
That's what I initially thought. And then on the second reading, I thought, oh, okay. I should be picking up on this a little faster.
A lion, think about it. They're on the coast of Calormen. I think they're still in Calormen.
Maybe it's a sea lion.
No, but remember, where is Aslan from? He's the son of the emperor over the east.
Yeah, they're always afraid of the sea.
Aslan comes over from the east. That's why the Telmarines later on are going to be afraid of the east. So I think, it's pretty clear.
Yeah. I'm just impressed with how well you know where everything is.
I've really been practicing.
Yeah, I think you've been studying some maps
since season 1. So let's go ahead and jump into the chapter and kind of break down, looking at each page and talking about some of the things we find. And we get to start with breakfast. We get to start with a nice little breakfast meal here. And what I'm going to say are some questionable ethical gymnastics performed by Bree. Yeah. So what happens to start this chapter off?
Is this because of the meat pasty?
No, it's more of how he is. Well, let's just jump into it. They wake up, and obviously you mentioned it in your summary. Shasta is very sore from having ridden Bree, and I think he fell they said a dozen times or something, which is not. That they say that so nonchalantly, that's a big deal. You fell off a horse 12 times.
Right. But to be fair, he was falling on springy stuff. I'm imagining the really springy.
You think Calormen's
marsh
is stuff. It's like a bouncy place. Yeah. It's like Rainbow Road.
Have you seen the behind the scenes for Pixar's Brave?
No, I've never seen the movie, so no.
You haven't even seen the movie. So they went to Ireland and they did a bunch of stuff.
Is it a cartoon?
Is it Scotland?
It's definitely Scotland. I know for a fact it's Scotland.
So they went to Scotland, and they were doing all this research, and there's this place where they're just jumping into the fields and it catches him like a trampoline and kind of springs him back up.
Sure.
Looks so fun. That's what I was picturing when he fell.
So it doesn't hurt as much. Okay, that's fair. Well, they wake up and they're still hungry, or they just are hungry because it's the morning. And Shasta and Bree find the food in, I guess, Bree's his pouch. It's not a kangaroo.
It's the saddlebag.
The saddlebag.
That came with the horse he stole.
And Shasta's like, hey, I don't know if we can take this stuff. It's kind of stealing. And here's what bothers me about this interaction, and this is why I'm already really warming up to Bree, and I like him a lot. Is he's like, hey, yeah, there's some food over in the saddlebags, right? And he says, oh, absolutely, a free horse and a talking horse, definitely, he says, mustn't steal. Of course. But it's okay for us to take it because we're prisoners and captive in enemy country. And so this is, our spoil, this is our booty. Mm-hmm. And I'm not convinced by this. I wish Bree would just be like, hey, you know what, dude, just take the food. It's fine. When they're not going to use it. Not like a deceitful way, but they did run away. And from what I understand, Shasta was not kidnapped or captured. I don't know. I haven't read the book, but he just appeared on the shore, and there was a man who died in the boat. So maybe that was his father. For all we know, he was he was orphaned. That doesn't mean he was kidnapped. So I don't know. I'm just not convinced by Bree's gymnastics. Yeah, we definitely shouldn't steal, but you can steal because here's all the reasons it's okay to do it. Just be like, hey, dude, you and me are going to steal this stuff.
Right. I think it's the combination of the two where he's saying this is wrong. It's all right.
Yeah.
It's probably one or the other.
Just be like, hey, you shouldn't usually steal, but if you're super, super hungry and you're in a faraway land and you had originally been... Oh, wait, now I guess I'm doing what Bree was doing. Okay, maybe these...
Sounds like the horse has a point.
Yeah, maybe these mental gymnastics actually work here. But I did like this about Bree. It shows some of Bree's logic, right? Some of his personality and kind of being this... I get this. He's kind of this straight shooter. He's going to tell you exactly like it is, right? And again, I've been with him for 2 chapters, so it could be totally different. But so far, hey, this is how it is. He even later on tells Shasta, he's kind of rude with him, talking about hey, I'd be embarrassed to be... Even if we weren't going to get caught, you're such a bad rider. I don't want to be seen with you.
Right.
And Lewis follows it up with, he was a great teacher.
Right. He was very patient. He gave him lots of advice, and he said there's no one better to teach you riding than a horse.
Yeah.
Which, that's a great point.
Look, I like you a lot. I'm happy to help you out. We'll do this together. I'm just embarrassed to be seen with you.
Yeah.
I love you. I just don't want anyone to know we're together. Right.
And back to the point around breakfast, he says, you won't eat natural food like grass and oats. And Shasta reveals that he had tried.
Yeah.
When was that?
Lewis seems to just kind of casually go over this. And here's my question to you. Is this a bit of... is this character work right here? Is this supposed to tell us about Shasta, or is this a little bit of comic relief?
I don't know. I feel like we've all tried oats, right?
Yeah, oats are different than... Didn't he eat grass, though?
We've all tried grass.
I have not tried
You've
grass.
Never tried grass?
No, I didn't eat grass. Maybe it was like a little baby or something.
Yeah.
Have you recently eaten grass?
No, not recently. Okay. But I'm sure as a kid, I probably ate some grass.
I don't know if 12-year-old me would have been going around being like, yeah, I ate a bunch of grass and oats and stuff.
You never had a Tom Sawyer phase? You pick a blade up, put it in your mouth?
Look, putting a honeysuckle in your mouth is not the same thing as then chewing it and swallowing it.
Yeah.
I used to always I'd go get my baseball mitt, go out, throw the ball back and forth with some of my roommates back down, down the street over here when we lived here in college. And I would always put the honeysuckles in my mouth just like I'd done as a little kid, but you don't eat it.
Yeah.
That's what I get from Shasta's I picked the blades up, I did my Tom Sawyer thing, and then I swallowed it. It's like that episode of Parks and Rec where Tom takes the dip and he swallows it. He gets super sick.
Well, there is an interesting intersection between a human world and the horse world where they're both speaking the same language.
Sure.
They have a shared experience of... They're not exactly where they're supposed to be because of something that happened when they were much younger. But they're so different. And we find out in this next part where the horse says, I'm going to go for a roll on my back. And Shasta just starts laughing at him. And we get another point, we get another look into the horse's personality where Bree is a little insecure about something that he's doing because it's been so long since he's been around other talking horses.
Yeah, this was a really interesting section. I reread this a couple of times. I did some highlighting here because we see that Bree has some identity issues here. I mean, and who could blame him, right? I don't think we know exactly how long he's been kidnapped. I actually don't even know how long horses live to be. I mean, maybe you do. I don't think they're like sea turtles with like 125, but they're also not like flies where it's like a couple of hours or whatever.
Yeah, so somewhere between
a couple of hours
and
and over
years.
100 years. So I'm gonna go ahead and say I am 100% sure that is right. It's somewhere between those two. And
it is 25 to 30 years.
25 to 30 years. Good for them. Yeah. That seems like kind of long for animals, right?
Yeah. Well, it's for a domesticated horse. Let's keep in mind.
Domesticated horse. Well, he is domesticated.
Yes, but he also speaks. It's also a magical world, and their timelines are different. But let's say roughly.
Let's go ahead and go with the 20 to 25 years. But for he has been in the country of Calormen for a long time, for most of his life, from what we understand. And he's very proud to be a Narnian horse, and he desires to get back. And there's this excitement to go to the north, to go to Narnia. And yet, this little insight, as he's rolling around, he's like, hey, actually, does this look dumb? Do I look stupid doing this? And don't hold back. Legitimately, can you just, for real?
Tell me, I can handle it.
Tell me if this looks stupid, right? Don't spare my feelings, I think are the words he uses. We see that there are some identity issues. He's worried, right? I wonder if I haven't spent so much time with the dumb horses, right? The horses that don't talk here in this foreign country to me, that I've picked up some of their habits. And so he struggles. He's like, wait, I know I'm Narnian, but I haven't been there for so long. So who am I really? And I wonder how much Lewis is going to unpack that. And there's this really great lesson for children. Even if you're not reading this from a Christian perspective, this is just a great lesson for anyone, although I think it carries, a particular amount of weight for us as we read as believers, is this idea of hey, the people you're around rub off on you. Hopefully, as you get older, you realize that means you should surround yourself with people who help encourage you to be a better person, but also realize that there's people around you that might actually bring out the worst in you. And we see that here, and I think that absolutely applies from a Christian perspective too. And this is a great place for if you're reading this with a child to pull out and say, hey, let's talk about this. Let's actually talk about what Bree is worried about here. And is this something we should be worried about? What does it mean to kind of be in this world but not of it? There's a lot of different ways we can discuss this that I find interesting. And even I'm going to add this too. I even think about the ancient Israelites as they are, many times out the Bible, but I think specifically of the exile to Babylon, where we start seeing in some parts of the Old Testament where they pick up some of the traits of their captors, and it's not for the best; it's actually for the worst. And so, this is, I think, a really strong biblical lesson. That's just boom, 2 paragraphs, just classic C.S. Lewis. Just let me throw that in there, and it just carries so much weight, and you almost don't realize it because of how just masterfully he just throws all these things together.
Right. And what's interesting is we haven't seen too much of that from Shasta. It seems like he's pretty different from those around him. We'll see a comment he makes later on when he meets someone else his age but who's a different gender than he is. And it's just, he says something that's really kind of foolish, and I'm curious where that came from, if that was something he picked up or if that's just truly not knowing yet. And he certainly gets educated.
So they decide that they are going to, in order to get to the north, they're going to go up on the coast, right? And unfortunately, they're going to have to go past a city known as Tashbaan, I think. I mean, that is the name of it. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. Okay. And they can't really avoid it. And, if they go around too far to the west, you get in a little bit of this more cultivated land is what Bree says. Hey, I don't really know it that well either. So for the most part, it'll just be kind of desert and small villages, but we do have this big city on the horizon. And on their way there, it takes weeks and weeks. And by the end of this chapter, they haven't even gotten there yet. Every other night, they stop. Shasta enters into the villages and, he buys food. From what I understand, he's not stealing food, is he? He's just buying food.
With the money that he stole.
Okay. That's true. All right.
I'll give you some space for your gymnastics. Go.
Yeah, that's fair.
He buys a loaf and some onions and radishes. So I know who the loaf is for, and I know who the radishes are for.
You think maybe he likes? Dude, I love onions. I love a good raw onion.
Really?
Yes.
You just bite it like an apple, like in holes.
No. But
you slice it up first, and then
if we're cooking or something, And we got to, we sliced up some onions. I'll eat a couple by myself. I mean, that's not my meal. I don't want that to be the meal.
You'll eat raw onions by yourself.
Like, yeah, you don't like raw onions?
No, I'm just glad that you didn't do that before you came over here and sat in the small room.
Yeah.
Podcast.
And he usually decides to go cook on the other side of the kitchen at that point. But I want to point out something that's interesting here, which is that there must be some sort of diversity of cultures here in that Shasta, who is a Narnian and doesn't look like any of the Calormen, is able just to casually kind of just walk into towns and just buy food. Yeah. The first chapter made me assume that he is the only Narnian anyone has ever seen, but that can't actually be the case because of the way that he's going about. And he seems like he's in the minority culture here, but it's not like this, oh my gosh, we've never seen someone who looks like you or walks or talks or acts like you kind of thing. And I guess he was raised as a Calormen, so other than just his own physical appearance, he probably very much knows how to act as a Calormen. That's how he was raised. Right. But I thought that was interesting because I almost in the first chapter was assuming that no one else looks like him at all.
Right. I'm also a little surprised that the whole plan was you need a horse to get further and the horse needs you so that he's not captured. And it seems like he's just walking into town and Bree's walking around the perimeter and then they're meeting up.
But yeah, I think that's fine because I imagine he's not in town for like 5 hours. Okay. Right. Let's say he
slip
goes
in, buy some stuff.
Yeah, slip in, buy some stuff. And maybe he might maybe he's getting some looks. Like, look at this kid over here.
Yeah, maybe this will catch up with him.
Yeah. I mean, you might know. Well, you only read what? How many? You've only like 2 chapters ahead of us.
3.
I'm just teasing.
No, also, I want to say this. So I tried.
What do you want to say?
I tried to listen to the audiobook, and I really did enjoy it. I think it's well done.
English?
In English.
Okay,
yes.
good.
Yeah. American English. No, I'm kidding. It was British English. But what I found is it is way harder to retain details from this book in order to do a podcast.
Yes.
I feel like if I was just going to sit back and enjoy it and I didn't have to know like where certain things happen.
Yeah.
But when I tried to sit down to prep for this, I reread it and I thought, oh, I had everything mixed up. I had the bigger points, but I didn't have the specific ones. And part of it could be listening to it when you're like tired at the end of a long week. Mm-hmm. That might be one thing. But I certainly felt much better reading through this, and you kind of remember more details that way.
Yeah, I mean, I always struggle with that kind of stuff with audiobooks. I've kind of like let it go for a little bit just because I've had so much. It's just hard for me to focus often when I read audiobooks. When I do, or listen to audiobooks, when I do Narnia here, I'll read it usually twice. And the day of, like today, I listen to the chapter. So like I already have a really, pretty good foundation. I've already read the chapter twice recently. I'll go back and listen just to like jog my memory one last time.
And make sure you know how to pronounce certain words.
Always, yes. Yeah. Which is funny. You listen to audiobook, but you said Shasta last time, even though they say Shasta in the...
Right, like I said, I didn't fully retain it all.
Oh, fair enough. There you go.
Also, I feel like of all the things, that one's pretty similar.
Yeah, that's close. It's not so... I know it's so Pespian now. I don't remember what we said.
We're not going to say it the wrong way again.
So, what did we call him? I don't remember.
Sopician or something. It was pretty bad.
Like that. Yeah. All right. So they've made it to the towns. They're doing well. It's a couple of weeks pass, and then they get attacked by Simba. Let's talk about this here. Oh, and no, I do want to say this before that happens. That's where we learn about that's where we see more of Bree's character here. Can I read actually a little bit from this?
Sure.
Here's what Lewis says in this kind of this transition over the course of these weeks. These were great days for Shasta, and every day better than the last as his muscles hardened and he fell less often. Even at the end of his training, Bree still said he sat like a bag of flour in the saddle. And even if it was safe, young'un, I'd be ashamed to be seen with you on the main road. But in spite of his rude words, Bree was a patient teacher. No one could teach riding so well as a horse. Shasta learned to trot, to canter, to jump, and to keep his seat even when Bree pulled up suddenly or swung unexpectedly to the left or the right, which, as Bree told him, was a thing you might have to do at any moment in battle. And then, of course, Shasta begged to be told of the battles and wars in which Bree had carried the Tarkan, and Bree would tell of forced marches and the fording of swift rivers or charges or fierce fights between cavalry and cavalry when the war horses fought as well as the men, being all fierce stallions trained to bite and kick, and to rear to the right moment so that the horses' weight as well as the riders would come down on the enemy's crest in the stroke of sword or battle axe.
Man, what a great set of paragraphs.
I mean, the beginning part is really the big character work, and then the rest of it is just wonderful prose by Lewis that I just, I've missed this. I've really missed this a lot. And yeah, it's such an interesting thing. We mentioned it already, but Bree just kind of has this, like, kind of a gruff, I think of like a professor. I think there's like this, maybe like, there's like stereotypical professors out there that really love what they do and they love to teach and they're good teachers, but they kind of just carry themselves as like a grumpy, whether it's an old man or old woman. I feel like they're always like older. They're just like, all these college kids or whatever. Yeah. But they love what they do and they really do love their students. But it's
and they do care.
And they do care.
Yeah, they just show it in a different way.
And that's kind of what Bree feels like. He's like the grumpy old teacher, right?
Yeah.
That's what I want to be one day.
Right.
I want to be a grumpy old teacher.
But he has experiences and he's sharing those experiences, but he also stops. He doesn't want to just talk about his time at war.
Well, yeah, I mean, and Shasta, out of the 4 characters so far, Shasta's my least favorite. I still like him a lot. But he just is such like a typical, whatever, preteen boy. Oh, tell me about the battles. I want to know these things. And Bree's like, dude, like, they were like intense things. They weren't, it wasn't fun. It wasn't adventures. It was war. And Bree's like, oh, so cool. I want to tell me more. and
I feel like you usually do not like the characters that remind you of you when you were younger.
I don't want to talk about this anymore. All right. You think this is me?
Yes.
Who are you Bree when you were younger?
Probably.
Which Narnian character were you when you were 12 years old? And why is it Eustace?
Honestly, I really do. I really do feel like in a slightly different way, Shasta is probably the same for me.
We can't both be the same character.
When I'm hanging out with someone who has had these experiences, I just want to know all about it. And I think I probably annoy quite a few people asking about all the stories that I wanted to hear. I would even ask about stories that I knew the answer to. Like I'd heard an interview with this person. I wanted to talk to them about that story.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. I think I can see that. So then let's keep going. They've traveled for weeks and weeks, and that's when we have the lion attack. Kind of paint the picture for us here, Phil. When is it? What's going on? Where are they?
So this takes place at night several weeks later. They decide to go for a moonlit ride. I assume for safety, because like the moon's so bright that they're able to still see, but they're not as easy to be spotted.
Yeah, I get the sense that they're mostly traveling at night to begin with. That this is mostly kind of an evening journey, that they might be trying to sleep through the day. I don't think that's happening all the time because obviously they have breakfast in the morning, but that's after just the first night, so maybe that's different.
And they make such a point of saying that they had slept during the day, so they did the evening.
It might just be kind of whatever they can do. It might be different all the time.
Yeah, and it might be a mix too. So they're maybe half a mile away from this forest, and the sea is a little bit hidden, and then Bree suddenly stops. What I imagine is, so whenever my dog hears something before I do, you can just tell. Like I could tell that you were here today because my dog gets up and starts moving.
The sailor's not a barker though.
He's ready to go greet whoever it is. Yeah, and I imagine Bree just has this extra sense of what's around him, probably through a better sense of hearing.
Yeah.
And he just stops, and Shasta's, he says, "What's up?" And Bree hushes him, and then he says there's this other horse, but that's the least of their problems. Because then they hear a lion's roar.
So we have these two dangers in to the side of them. So they got the horse coming up, which appears to be the horse probably of a Tarkan, which remind me, Phil, what is the Tarkan? Are they these like lords? Do we really understand what the economy is like in, or is it like in?
It sounds like they're in positions of power. They have more power than regular.
Are they aristocrats? Or are they landowners? Like how, do we have a feudal system here? I don't think any of that's been explained, is it?
I equated them to royalty.
Royalty.
Or maybe like a count would be royalty.
I was thinking like, okay, let's put it in Lewis's world. Let's think of like English aristocrats, right, who are landowners. And I was thinking it more like that. So you're kind of, or even if we think of the feudal system, let's think of kind of the vassals, right, who own the land. And so they're not necessarily royalty, but they're very high up. And they carry a lot of social and significance, right? Social significance.
I would imagine it's people who do not have to work for money. They have income
Oh, yeah.
just by existing.
Absolutely, yes. But they're not, I assume they're all not related. It's more kind of like how, like I said, let's keep going back. I was thinking appointed. I was literally thinking of like, okay, in England where you have these long lineages of families, and yes, you have a royal family, but then you also have families who have owned a certain part of land. Like say they've owned land in Yorkshire, they've owned land in Suffolk or something like that for long periods of time. That's what I got the sense of. Now, we obviously know that there's not a lot of English influence on the Calormans when Lewis is creating this culture, but that's what I got having now read two chapters.
Yeah.
But it is Tarkhan, and then I understand because Erebus later on is going to be called Tarkina. I guess that's the feminine form of the word. So we got Tarkhans and Tarkinas.
Mm-hmm.
So they have decided. Okay, back to this thing now. Now we got some of these words down. They believe it's a Tarkhan, not on a war horse, but on a blood mare. I assume this is not a horse painted red. What is a blood mare?
A mare is the female version of a horse.
Yeah, I knew that. I was afraid maybe like a couple.
You were asking for the
a couple of listeners might not have known. I knew it, easily because I Googled it on my way over here.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought some other people might not know it.
Oh.
So
Must have really long range Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Okay. So they are being chased by a Tarkhan on a horse, or what they believe to be a Tarkhan. We know
it's a
Tarkhan.
Tarkhan.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did I say?
Tarkhan.
Like Tarkin.
He's
like,
the one.
like
he's the one who holds Vader's leash.
So that's probably where it's coming from. I'm having a hard time saying it. So the Tarkhan, which is really Erebus, which I guess this really isn't wrong because she's a Tarkina, right? So she is this kind of this lineage or of this nobility, but just not what we expect, obviously. And then there's also the lion's roar. And obviously, Bree makes the wise decision that, like, actually the lion's worse. Like a Tarkhan is not good, or Tarkhan, excuse me, is not good, but a lion is worse. And so what happens now?
Well, they keep maneuvering to get away from the lion's roar, and they end up in a stream, and then they end up they continue on after that, and finally they fully escape. But they realize they're standing right next to the people that they were running alongside that whole time.
Yeah.
So before they were a stone's throw away, now they're almost right on top of each other.
But before that, let's break down what's happening here with the lions. Can I read a little paragraph here?
Sure.
So here's what Lewis writes as they are trying to get away from the sound of the lion. The cloud was bigger and thicker than it had looked at first, and soon the night grew very dark. Just as Shasta was saying to himself, "We must be nearly at those sandhills by now," his heart leaped into his mouth because an appalling noise had suddenly risen out of the darkness ahead. A long, snarling roar, melancholy and utterly savage. Instantly, Bree swerved round and began galloping inland again as fast as he could gallop. "What is it?" gasped Shasta. "Lions," said Bree, without checking his pace or turning his head. After that, there was nothing but sheer galloping for some time. At last, they splashed across a wide, shallow stream, and Bree came to a stop on the far side. Shasta noticed he was trembling and sweating all over.
And this is where they have a bit of a respite because they feel like the water must have thrown off the scent.
Until they hear the sound of what? 2 lions. And I think this, to me, is what really stood out to me, because the first time I say lion, again, we're reading Narnia, so I just went straight to, okay, it's Aslan. And then the whole chapter ends, and there's no acknowledgement of it being Aslan. And in fact, lion is always lowercase. It's not capitalized, and there's been other times when we've referred to Aslan, it's had a uppercase L. Right. It's been capitalized. And I think this makes sense too, because for both, I don't know what Bree knows about Aslan, but Shasta's going to have no idea who the Great Lion is. But this whole idea of there being 2 of them, to me, just shows the magic of Aslan. I don't believe there are 2 lions here. My reading of this is that there's one. There's only the illusion to Bree and Shasta that there are 2.
Ventriloquist lion. I got you.
Okay. Yeah. No, not a ventriloquist.
Throwing his roar.
But I get the sense that Aslan, through just his own power, is making it seem as if there is 2 of him. And what he is doing here is he is forcing Aravis and Hwyn and Shasta and Bree to come together for this adventure. Now, I don't know what happens next. I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and make my guess that Aravis and Hwyn will be around for most of the book. But, for all I know, they might disappear in the next chapter. But my guess is that Aslan here, this is divine providence and pushing them together. Because had Aslan not intervened through the lion's roar, Hwyn and Aravis, right, that's her name, Aravis, would have maybe just gone their separate ways, because we know they're trying to escape too. So for all we know, they're sitting on, Aravis is riding Hwyn and like, we got to get away from these people, look out for them. And had Aslan not brought them together, they would have gone their separate ways. And I think, how often do we see in the Bible where something might look, or even in our own lives, we can think of things, and we don't have to go into things right now, but there's times where it feels like maybe God is doing something really difficult, or it seems like we're being put in danger. Maybe if it's just not even physical danger, but just, I don't like what's happening here. I think of the same thing as like when I tell my son to get away from the oven, right? Or not to touch the electrical sockets. And he gets really mad at me. How dare you do this, Dad?
That is how he talks.
Yeah, that's his voice, actually. Yeah. That was actually him. We brought him in just to say that. Yeah. All right, thanks, buddy. You can leave now. And that's him walking away. He's 10 months old. Yeah. And but how often does this happen where, because we don't really understand what's happening, I'm sure that the lion seems, and it does, incredibly frightening, and it feels like they're in danger. I don't believe that they ever were in danger. And in fact, we know that because if this is Aslan, which I believe it is, Aslan's not going to attack them. He's a great lion, and he's not safe, but he's not going to attack Shasta and Bree. And also, who else is going to attack them? Aravis and Hwyn, because they're also escaping themselves.
Right.
So it seems like it is. And what Aslan is doing through his providence is almost creating a situation that feels dangerous, but it's actually for their own good. They just can't see it yet because they don't have the omniscience that Aslan does. They don't have the full picture Aslan does. And so they need, this is where we come in as readers. They have to trust him. They don't know they have to trust Aslan yet. They don't know that that's who it is.
Right.
But I think that's another great, just like a little short lesson here from Lucis. And again, I don't think he's writing these as lessons as much as he is as just these supposals of, suppose this is what would happen, with this.
Right. It has pretty direct parallels to stuff we see in Scripture. I also love how, because he's in two places, you kind of get the sense that he's kind of like a sheepdog, like he's herding them exactly where they need to go, where he's on this side, and there's only one way out.
Sure.
Yeah.
So then, sorry, I kind of went back after you'd gotten us all the way up to this, past this stream of water. Let's go back to where you stopped us at. You've got Hwyn and Aravis, who are unknown to Shasta and Bree, and they're actually next to Shasta and Bree. What happens in this exchange?
Well, they find out that everybody can talk.
Everybody can
Shasta
talk.
overhears the horse saying something and doesn't believe it at first, which is so funny to me because he already has one horse that's speaking, but he's not quite going to believe that this one actually said something. I don't know,
man. If you're the one guy who found a talking horse, what are the chances
of finding
the second horse? Of a second horse that they didn't do that. So yeah, and then Bree goes up and like acknowledges the I love just what occurs throughout the rest of the chapter, which is that Bree and Hwyn as horses seem to have their own kind of social customs, and these social customs make Shasta and Aravis extremely uncomfortable, and it's hilarious.
Well, they're a little surprised that the horses are running everything, and the horses, they're almost the adults in this situation.
Yeah, it feels like it, right?
They're running stuff, but the kids are not used to it because they're used to humans being in charge, not
there's this weird
animals.
There's this weird juxtaposition because Hwyn and Bree as the horses, and this is what I get from Calorman culture, which is that there very much is a hierarchy of, animals don't need to be, not that we don't get the sense that they're like abused or anything or treated poorly, but it's very much like humans are on top, they're in control, and animals are below them. But we know, and I literally, as I said that, your dog walked into the room. He's like, that's right.
Amazing timing.
That's right. I'm here to stick up for my horse brothers and sisters.
Hey, baby.
But this is very different than the culture you have in Narnia, where you have these talking beasts who are for more or less on the same kind of, if we're going to think about it as a hierarchy, are on the same level as humans would be, right? I mean, I guess there's not a lot of other humans, but from what we understand, because at this point in Narnia, there's only the four, the royalty, which this is an even bigger question. So there's humans everywhere but in Narnia. We'll come back to this later. I have to think about this, but you do have, like, Mr. Tumnus as a fawn is no less, no better than a beaver. There's kind of seems to be this kind of equal playing field for all things that talk, right? And maybe even not that, because the trees are treated in a certain way too. And I guess wood nymphs can talk and stuff. So maybe that's whatever. We're not gonna get into all that. Lewis's world is not meant to be unpacked like in this kind of way. It's not supposed to be deconstructed here. But I think it is interesting that the horses, like, of course we would all just kind of treat each other the same, where both Shasta and Erebus, having been raised in Calormen, are kind of like, no, excuse us, we're the humans, you guys sit this one out, even though you both seem way more experienced and should be the ones leading this little expedition to the north. We want to do it because we're humans and we're better than you, kind of thing.
Right.
I don't think it's that dramatic necessarily, but there is that tension there.
Yeah, they're just not used to not calling the shots, I guess.
I'm especially sure for Erebus, considering that she's a Tarkina, I'm going to assume that she comes from a position of wealth and power, right?
Yeah.
The conversation between Erebus and Shasta here is hilarious. And what's so funny is you think about Lewis right now. So he's writing this in the early 50s, really not having spent a ton of his time around children. He writes in the early 40s in The Abolition of Man that he doesn't really like kids all that much. And at this point, he hasn't had, obviously he's dedicated this book to David and Douglas, but, and then he had Janie Moore's daughter living with him too for some period of time. Although I think at this point she had grown, she was much older. But so he has been around kids, but he's not someone, like, he's not a teacher. He's not a parent himself. And yet the way that he writes his dialogue between Shasta and Erebus, this seems like a guy who has, like, watched, who has just been a fly on the wall in classrooms or in households to know how two siblings talk to each other. Because they have that, or just like two rivals in a classroom or something like that, right? Talk to each other because they're so frustrated with one another.
Right. Even as soon as she says something, Shasta exclaims, "Why, it's only a girl." And she replies, "And what business is it of yours if I am only a girl?" And then Sheila just immediately flips it back on him. "You're probably only a boy, a rude, common little boy." And then she nails it. A slave, probably, who's stolen his master's horse.
Which isn't far off from the truth.
Right.
Right?
But I also feel like the reason she knows that is maybe she did the same thing.
You think so?
Just the fact that she gets there so fast.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's going to be your guess for... So I guess now I know that we don't find out in the next chapter. I thought we were going to find out her story next one.
Maybe we do, and I'm throwing you off.
That. Oh, okay.
Or maybe I would say that to make you think that's really what I was going to do.
Oh, okay. Now I'm confused. But... they're so quarrelsome, as I think the word that Lewis uses to describe this whole scene. And the horses you get are just kind of like rolling their eyes a little bit, like, all right, these guys, they need to calm down a little bit here. And this is in this part of this dialogue here is where we find out that Erebus and Hwin have escaped too and are also heading to the north. Erebus, the different thing here is Erebus is not originally from Narnia. Now, we don't know that Shasta is from Narnia either. In fact, Bree says he either is from Narnia or maybe Archenland, which, as I looked at a map, it is south of Narnia. It's kind of between Calormen and Narnia. It's a country, and I don't think we've ever heard much of this at all, or maybe not at all. Whereas Erebus clearly is a Calormen. She very much is. She's not just a Calormen. She's very high up within the society. And so I'm really interested to find out why she might have left, considering it seems like she probably has a considerable amount of privilege here and power in this society. Hwin, however, is another kidnapped horse. She is a Narnian horse. And now we're going to go start our double date, which is what it's like is happening here. Actually, not at all. I really don't think there's any romantic stuff happening so far, at least none that I picked up on. But it is like we've got the lady, the little girl and her horse, and the little boy and his horse.
Right. Also,
he should call this like The Horse and His Boy or something like that.
Yeah. Well, now it's interesting. Why isn't it the horse and her girl?
Yeah. I will actually. I will say this after I make my terrible dad joke here, which is that I like that the book is called The Horse and His Boy. I had actually never thought. It's such, again, I haven't read the book, but I don't remember not knowing the title, The Horse and His Boy. Yeah. It's one of those things where you don't like think about it.
It becomes so commonplace that when you actually break down the parts, you realize how clever it is.
Why is it not The Boy and His Horse? And I love that. And we're already, I think 2 chapters in, we can see why Lewis names it that already. Yeah. But I do love that relationship, that it really is Bree and his boy, right? So any other things we should talk about before we get to this last couple of paragraphs here?
Well, just the observation that the horse Bree makes. What quarrelsome creatures these humans are. They're as bad as mules. And I think that, or the line that comes up shortly after, is Melancholy Winnie. Either of those would be great titles for this chapter.
Okay.
Melancholy Winnie, Bad as Mules, either one.
I like that. They're pretty frustrated, and really the only way they get them to calm down is by Aravis shutting Shasta down is really the only thing that kind of ends this quarrel. And it's not like over, it's just that it has been paused for a bit.
Right.
There's also in this conversation something that's a little confusing to me, speaking of maps and geography like we were doing earlier, which is that both horses reminisce about the grasslands up above Beaver's Dam. Are we to understand that Mr. and Mrs. Beaver are the only beavers, or this is the only dam in Narnia?
Maybe
it's capitalized like a proper place.
Maybe a bunch of people share a dam, like the Hoover Dam. Like no one person lives there.
I'm pretty sure Hoover owns it, dude. That's why he got to name it.
He's pretty busy with the FBI, but he does like to manage water.
I think it was that Hoover, not the President Hoover.
Oh, I guess it could be either one.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know either.
Or the guy who made the Dyson vacuum.
Is his last name Dyson?
No. Dyson made it, not Hoover. I was trying to mix it up.
A little vacuum humor here. But the chapter ends. Okay, back to our final thing here. We've had a lot of fun side conversations today. The chapter ends with Aravis getting ready to tell her story. And I really love what Lewis does here. We end on this cliffhanger of Aravis being ready to tell her story, and we're going to find out what I assume are going to be very exciting things and reasons for her fleeing to the north. But also, he makes a point to tell us a little bit about Calorman culture, which is that it seems to be a potentially, it's implied, I believe, a culture that uses oral tradition to kind of pass down. That storytelling is a thing you're taught, he says, as opposed to being taught essay writing, and that everyone loves to listen to the stories of Calormans. In fact, Aravis even kind of changes her tone and her voice and her style of speaking in preparation to begin the story. So she is not just someone, she's almost like a bard in this way. We might think, think of in Western culture. And so Lewis, as he's kind of, comparing these two things, the way that Aravis tells her story and the way that English boys and girls learn through essay writing, the last chapter in the sentence is the difference, after saying that English boys and girls write essays, the difference is that people want to hear the stories, whereas I never heard of anyone who wanted to read the essays. And so you do see Lewis, we talked a little bit about this in the last chapter about some of the critiques that Lewis has gotten while writing this book. But here's a place where I think he's actually valuing something that's very different than his own culture. And you do obviously see oral tradition, especially with the Anglo-Saxons. Think of things like Beowulf before it's written down and stuff. But traditionally, Western culture has been predominantly a written culture for a long period of time. Right. And so here he is saying, actually, kind of making a jab at that. Actually, that can be very boring and almost rote after a while, whereas there's this very exciting creative aspect of oral tradition that maybe is lacking in some places. And so I thought that was a really good thing and a compliment that we could give to Lewis here as he's kind of, looking at these various different cultures in the book.
Yeah. I also feel like he is setting an example for, hey, here's something that I like. And for example, a lot of the points that he makes in the Chronicles of Narnia could be made in an essay in a very dry way. Mm-hmm. And we know that because that's been done. But there's something different
Oh, which one of his essays are dry essays? Go on record now with all of our Lewis listeners and tell us which essays.
I'm not talking about his list.
I sure hope you aren't. I'm just kidding.
I'm not talking about his essays. I'm talking about essays in general.
Whose essay? Go ahead, just name the people. It sounds like you're bothered by. I
don't want to put your last name out there.
Is it because I sent you one of my essays recently?
I think that even the formats that you choose to teach in are not written. You're not handing out paragraphs and paragraphs for your students to read that you wrote. You're telling them stories.
Yeah.
I think that we're, for some reason, built to hear things through stories. And there's a place for reading essays, sure, but I love that Lewis is setting the example and identifying why it's better, because people want to hear stories. They don't necessarily want to hear an essay.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would even go as far as say he's saying it's better. He's almost just highlighting a difference and being like, hey, there's pros and cons to these different ways of doing things. And how wonderful is it in the modern world that we have access to both types of way of either recording history or storytelling itself, Right. I mean, literally what we're doing right here is nothing is written down. I mean, our notes right now are a page long for the whole episode. So this is very much more in the manner of storytelling, right? Although it's mostly just us just like messing around in front of microphones. But, we like to pretend that it's a little bit more professional than that.
Yes.
Well, anything to finish about this chapter before we wrap up chapter 2?
I don't think so. I'm excited to hear what Daniel's dilemma is going to be this week.
So the next chapter is entitled At the Gates of Tashbaan. And I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to not talk about the fact that I guess they must be getting to that city, but instead my prediction, I guess my dilemma here is to find out what is Aravis going to tell us in their story. So I've kind of given her a little bit of some backstory here. All right. Aravis is the daughter of a famous lord of Calormen. Not just like any lord, but like a lord that...
A famous one.
When you say to him, like, oh, that guy? That Shasta's going to be like, oh my gosh, that's the so-and-so Tarkhan, okay?
So you have kings and then are lords under them?
Yes, correct.
And where do the lords hang out?
What do you mean, like where, like in their home?
Okay, so they're separate. They're not like in the court.
No, I mean, some could be, but if you have like a certain set of land, let's say, again, I don't know that this is a feudal system. I could be totally wrong.
But if it were,
what you're going to have is you might have a king in a castle, but then in some places you would have lords there, but in other places, maybe a couple of, miles away, maybe many miles away, you have another estate. Even I think recently, I just mentioned Downton Abbey. So Downton is its own estate, and there's many grounds there, and most of that land was owned by, in the TV show, the Crawley family, which is an aristocratic family. Okay. And they control what happens on those lands. Now, that's not how a lot of things are done today, obviously, and that's the whole show's kind of about, as you see the change of society. But you have those people who are very much, as owners of the land, they control most of the wealth. Okay. So that's very, very basic understanding. I've left out many nuances in the feudal system, so no one has to email us to be like, actually, it wasn't. I know it's not exactly like that, but just a simple way of kind of putting it. So that's my idea. So she is the daughter of a famous Calormen, and here's what I think. I think that she is being not forced into marriage, but kind of being potentially maybe kind of like a little matchmaker stuff. Like here, she just met a guy and like, hey, when you're like 7 years from now, you're going to have to go marry this guy, but you have to meet him now. You can shake his hand, whatever. But she just found out that when she's so-and-so age, she's going to have to be married off. And she's like, I don't want to live this life, and has decided to run away. And Hwyn is actually, unlike Shasta and Bree, Hwyn has been her like father's horse forever. So they're actually like old friends as opposed to Shasta and Bree, who are brand new. And that what Aravis is going to struggle with in this book, as I think she's going to struggle a lot with her identity in the fact that she is a Calormen, and not just a Calormen, but a very high up in that society, but also is realizing through Shasta and Bree and Hwyn, who've all, in some way been kidnapped, or even, Shasta was obviously not treated well by his father, who've actually seen some of the bad things about this society and culture. And Aravis is going to have to kind of go like, well, what does it mean for me to be, I still am a Calormen, but there's also parts of my culture that have maybe hurt other people. And that's part of her identity kind of thing here. That might not be it at all.
Wow.
That's my guess.
You've given that a lot of thought.
I did.
I can't say anything. Because I know what's going to happen,
you know
but
exactly
you don't.
what's going to happen.
I have a vague memory of what's going to happen.
Go ahead. Can we do one more thing? Now that I assume we have our 4 main characters for this book, go ahead and rank them for us in chapter 2. We've introduced all of them. I like my rankings. Go ahead. Just do it.
Bree, Wynn, Erebus, Shasta.
All right.
Shasta. Oh,
so you
man.
think
Almost.
Shasta's he is also at the bottom for me. I'm going to go Erebus, Bree, Hwyn. Just because we don't know Hwyn, really. She didn't make a very big impression on me yet. I'll give her a couple more chapters.
From the little I know, I really like Hwyn.
Yeah, no, I like it too. And then Shasta. Again, I like Shasta, and I find him quite enjoyable here in the way that he sulks about at the end of this chapter. But I find the rest of them just a little bit more compelling so far. So
Okay.
All right, well, we've got email that we're going to get to before we end today's episode. We've got an email from Teresa Lee, and you read the last email in the last episode, so I'll go ahead and read this one.
Okay.
All right, so in her email, Teresa writes, "Hello, Daniel and Phil. My name is Teresa Lee. I'm currently a sophomore at Wichita State University." All right, go Shockers, right? Yeah. "I first discovered your podcast back in January of 2019 while I was on a vocation discernment retreat and was looking for a podcast I could listen to while doing my evening stretches. I decided to search for a Narnia podcast because I had grown up listening to the Chronicles of Narnia audiobooks my parents bought when I was 5 or 6. I've never actually sat down and read each book in the series, but I know those books front to back. However, I wanted to explore more deeply the message Lewis was conveying through each book in the series. Your guys' podcast was exactly what I was looking for. I love the way you go chapter by chapter and thoroughly break down and analyze the passages inside. I've gained so much insights that have increased my love of Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia all the more. What I like most about your podcast is the conversational manner you go about discussing the chapters." Oh, you got a lot of that today.
A lot of conversation.
"It is so relaxing and entertaining to hear you two bounce back off each other and share your thoughts. I can hardly wait for you to begin the Horse's Boy." Hey, well, here we are.
That's right.
Because she said this is her favorite book in the series. "I'm aware it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I love watching the profound character development of Shasta and Bree. Hopefully, after going through the Horse's Boy, you guys will see what I mean. I know this has been a long email, but it's not that bad. Don't worry about it. We've had much, much longer. We like long emails. But I wanted to make up for all the times I thought about emailing you guys and forgot about it. Thank you for all your hard work in keeping this podcast going. Your podcast not only keeps me energized during my workouts, it is also a great way to wind down at the end of a long day. Daniel and Phil, may God bless and keep you always. All the best, Teresa Lee."
Wow, that's so fun. It is amazing that people are searching for a Narnia podcast and finding ours.
It's probably because of your great art that the company's all over.
I hope
the
that
place when
helps.
you search for it. Yeah.
But I also think that we've been very consistent in publishing.
Yeah.
And the fact that you've put us so many places.
Yeah. So Teresa, this is a great email. Thanks for sharing this with us. And she leaves us with a little thing to discuss here in the postscript. She just says, "What is your guys' favorite book series of all time and why?"
Oh, man.
Just a simple little question of what's your favorite books of all time. I'll let you start, Phil, because I've seen this email for a while and I still haven't decided.
Oh, you can't pick your favorite?
Okay, I guess I'll start because I know this isn't fair. I have thought a little bit about my answer, and you just heard this email for the first time. So a series is hard for me because honestly, there are so many series.
Honestly, it's Animorphs. That's what you're going to say.
All right, you talk about Animorphs thing. Go.
No, you go ahead.
No. Tell us about Animorphs.
No. Animorphs is your favorite. You talk about it.
No, mine's not Animorphs.
I know.
But
go ahead. What's yours?
There are so many series I haven't finished, and I feel uncomfortable saying that any series is my favorite having not finished it. Like, I can't even really feel like I can say Narnia because I haven't read all the books.
Yeah.
I haven't finished this book. I mean, I wouldn't say Lord of the Rings because I'm, the hill that I am willing to die on is that Lord of the Rings is one book. It was written as one book. But I will say Tolkien's Legendarium as a series, I absolutely love that. I recently read The Silmarillion. I really enjoyed that. I love The Hobbit. I've been reading some more of the history of Middle-earth stuff. So I really like Tolkien a lot. I also was thinking this is also not quite like a series, but I adore Homer, and I love the Iliad and the Odyssey. I'm just wrapping up with my 5th graders reading the Iliad. We're about to go into the Odyssey. Some of my favorite things to teach and read, and especially with works. And I know technically they're not books; it's epic poetry, but especially with works like that where there's all these different translations and stuff, it feels like you can never stop learning about books like that. So I love the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I find especially the Iliad, to be one of the most captivating books on the human condition and the idea of death and what it means to know that we die. And so, yeah, I mean, I know it's just 2 books. It's not even really a book series, but it is something I regularly come back to. Almost like I feel like I never really even leave it because I'm always thinking about it, even if I'm not currently reading it at a time. And then I guess, I finished That Hideous Strength this past, or last year. I finished it last year in 2020, and I loved the space trilogy. It's at this point, I mean, it's really the only series. I know Lewis didn't write that many series, but since I haven't actually finished Narnia, I would have to say it's my favorite series by Lewis that I've finished. And I did think that the space trilogy is a series that continuously gets better, deeper, and richer as each book goes along. I think there's very few series that only get better with each entry, and I really firmly believe that the space trilogy is one of those. And that's coming from someone who couldn't finish That Hideous Strength the first time I read it, and then I really got into it. And I actually, even that part, that beginning part that some people say is hard to push through, I loved it actually. And I don't know if that's just because I work in a school now, and so it's obviously I don't work at a college, but I kind of enjoyed actually Lewis's contemplation on the collegiate scene and some of the things he does there. But so I'd say space trilogy, Tolkien's universe, and then Homer's epic poems are kind of a series for me.
I know you've only read Dune, right?
I have only read Dune.
Sequels.
Have you read? Should I read Dune Messiah next?
I haven't read it yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've also I read last year. Anyone that listens to the Dancing Law knows that I talked often about how I read the first book of the Wheel of Time. I read The Eye of the World, and I struggled a little bit to get through it. I didn't dislike it, but I didn't. There's 14 books, and that's stressful for me. Same with Stormlight Archive. I bought that book, the first one, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, whenever. And it's just been sitting on my shelf because I'm that's a really big commitment. So I often stay away from large series just because I'm I know that there's a lot of time commitment out there. But so those are my favorite, though. I'd say those 3.
Yeah. For me, it's always hard to talk about books that you read a really long time ago because you're not sure, was that really good because that was the best thing I had read at the time? Would it still hold up? Would I enjoy it the same way now? But for me, it would be Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game set of books. How many of those did you read?
I read none of them. I saw the movie when it came out because some friends wanted to see it. Didn't like it at all. And I feel like this is a huge gap I have, especially when it comes to science fiction because so many people love those books. But I've not read any of them. Saw the movie, didn't like it.
I feel like a lot of people that do like it read it in kind of middle school, maybe early high school. Mm-hmm. And then it's one of those things where the first book is pretty different than the rest of the books.
Okay.
So Ender's Game is good. I really did enjoy that. But what I really liked were all the sequels that came after it. And this was one of the things where the librarian at my school, who was actually a family friend, heard that I liked that. And she said, well, there's a couple sequels out. Maybe you should check those out too. Yeah. And I started reading them and I just went through them. And I had a friend who was also reading them at the time. Mm-hmm. And you get so immersed in this universe that's so fully built out and constructed. It's really enjoyable.
Yeah. So Ender's Game, by Card. What else?
Yeah. I don't remember too much about this, but I remember really enjoying 2 books that Frank Peretti wrote. He's a pretty well-known Christian author, but he wrote Hangman's Curse, and it was
I've heard of that. Yeah.
I think the only way to describe it would be it definitely has Christian themes. The main characters are brother and sister. They're Elijah and Elisha.
Nice.
Yeah, and there was just some really neat stuff that seemed pretty real. One of the characters needs to find out where he is, and he figures out his location by timing a quarter hour and then putting blades of grass in a certain order and figuring out where he is. But it was kind of horror / sci-fi. It was pretty different. Yeah. That was one of the more exciting things to read.
Well, cool. Yeah. Can I add 2 more that I did actually just think of right now as you were talking that came to mind with me?
Definitely.
And I was thinking about this because I wonder if you have this because as an illustrator, I was thinking of one of my favorite, not super well-known comic series that I adored. I'm a really, really big fan of Spider-Man. I love Amazing Spider-Man. I think that's one of I do not keep up with it at all anymore. I wish I could. But as a kid, I just devoured those. I read at least the first 150 issues. and then was reading as they were coming. As I was like a teen, like a preteen, they were in like the 500s. I think now they're past 700s. But there was a short stint. This is kind of a spoiler, but not really because it's comic books that came out years ago. Where in ASM, Amazing Spider-Man number 700, Spider-Man is killed by Dr. Octopus. And they created a new comic series written by Dan Slott, who wrote Amazing Spider-Man for a long period of time, called The Superior Spider-Man. It's only about 26, 27, maybe 30 issues long. And I consider it kind of a series just because it's not like Amazing Spider-Man, which has been around since the 60s, and there's hundreds of issues. There's only like 30 issues here. It very much, there's different kind of, chapters within it if you go buy like the trade paperback or something like that. But what happens is that Peter Parker is killed by Dr. Octopus, but Dr. Octopus has his brain somehow inserted into Peter Parker's body. So that the Superior Spider-Man is Dr. Octopus stuck inside of Peter's body and actually kind of grappling with morality and looking inside at himself, thinking about, like, for the first time, actually seeing how hard it is to be Peter Parker, seeing what it means like to do the right thing, the whole great power, great responsibility thing. And as Peter's subconscious is actively fighting back against Dr. Octopus, so that you're actually growing more. I mean, for me, I was like, do I almost want Peter to come back? Because I'm starting to like the way that Otto Octavius is starting to behave and stuff. So it's a really great. I recommend it to anybody who's like, hey, I've always wanted to maybe read comics or something, or just want like a short kind of contained story. That isn't like, you should go read Watchmen. You should go read The Dark Knight Returns.
I was going to say Halloween. Those two are definitely on the list. And The Long Halloween with Tim Sale doing the art.
Yeah, I actually like Long Halloween more than Dark Knight Returns, but I don't like the artwork in that book. I know you probably do, but
it's a great graphic novel. The art is pretty different, but then with The Long Halloween, the art's amazing.
Oh my gosh!
Oof.
I love The Long Halloween. That's another one I would recommend. And it might be actually too. I might put that in my favorite series as well too. Yep. I know it's comics, a little bit different, but that's be my second one then. Yeah, Long Halloween is just I'm probably going to reread it soon now that you just said that. I've got it on my shelf at home. So those are two. But yeah, I always love telling people, when people ask about, series, when I think of comic books, I'm like, go check out Superior Spider-Man. Not that many people read it. People were really turned off by the fact that Spider-Man was dead. And this was I read it as it was coming out. And it was like 2 years where like there wasn't Spider-Man in Marvel, and so it's kind of fun that they carried through and they told a really interesting story. So those are I hope there's some good answers for Teresa there. Yeah. Just to you don't have to go anyone no, and our listeners don't have to go read those, but just kind of give some insight into what series we enjoy.
Yeah. Well, I'll wrap this up here.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
This episode is made possible by our patrons over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support the show, you too can listen to a bonus episode each month, along with other rewards. Special thanks goes to Elias Dean, Hannah Anderson, John Marr, Emily Margaret, and Ryan Smith for supporting us at our top tiers. Listener feedback, we'd love to hear it. thenarniapodcast@gmail.com, or leave us a voicemail at 406-646-6733.
Yeah, should we I think, did we say last time? Maybe we already did, and this is unneeded, but we're obviously we've not been using the Facebook for a while. I do not check Twitter as much as I used to. I only check like every 2 or 3 weeks. So if you send us stuff there, that's great. We love for you to follow us.
We love email, and we really like voicemails.
Yeah, and if people, exactly. But if you do reach out to us on Twitter, I'm not ignoring you. I don't get on all the time. I get on just every couple of weeks and stuff. So we try to respond to anybody who reaches out to us there. It might not be immediate.
Right. And a review on Apple Podcasts would also help other listeners find our show. And
especially now that it's paid, they got to pay for it now.
We're not charging for it. And
in fact, if you don't leave us a review, Phil got so mad when I said that. If you don't leave us a review on Apple Podcasts,
then we are going
to charge you.
We're going to hold the next 2 seasons hostage.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds like a great way to lose everybody. Thank you for coming along on this journey, and we will be back next time with Chapter 3.
Chapter 3.
And hey, thanks for listening all the way.
Thanks for still hanging out with us here. You guys found the secret track, the hidden...
That's right.
The little thing here. All right, we should really leave now, though, right?
Okay.
All right, can you get the door?
That's your son with his giant feet.